Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and to another video. This video is a bit of a mishmash of a couple of things that I've been up to since we last saw each other. We are still very much in lockdown in Melbourne. I think we're coming on to like week 8, or no, maybe even more than that. I've lost count, could be even week 10. Anyway, we're still in lockdown, so I'm still doing mostly smaller work at home. I've been doing some landscape sketches and things lately. This was a photo that I took on a recent walk of our local area, and I decided that I wanted to paint this on some paper, and I wanted to do a couple of these. I think I did 2 on this particular day, and I have done a couple more, and I'll be releasing them all as a bit of a collection once I've got, half a dozen or so together. But this was the first one that I painted from these photos that I took. So this is just acrylic paint. I'm painting on watercolor paper. So this is, I believe this is actually Art Spectrum hot press watercolor paper. It's about 300 GSM and it's quite smooth. I prefer to work on smooth paper. I don't like watercolor paper that has a lot of texture when I'm painting with acrylics, because I find the paint just sticks a little bit too much. I prefer a smoother surface. So that's why I like the hot press smooth paper. And yeah, these are just regular heavy body paints. I'm using a combination of Matisse and golden acrylics. And yeah, so I thought you guys might like to see this process. I filmed most of it, here and there from start to finish. I obviously am not going to show you every single minute. It took me probably about 40 minutes or so to paint it, but I do show you most of the process. And you can see that I didn't really sketch anything to start with. I'm just blocking in the general shapes and shadows in first. And I thought I'd answer a couple of questions that I've had recently on a couple of different social media platforms as well. One question I had recently was from someone who was doing my Skillshare classes, and they mentioned that they are having a bit of trouble getting the consistency of their paint to be opaque enough. They're saying that it doesn't matter how many layers they put down, the paint just seems really wishy-washy and transparent, and they can't get the kind of coverage that I get with my acrylic paint. And without having information on the type of paint that you're using or watching you actually paint in front of me, it's kind of hard to work out what's going on there. But my guess would be that the paint that you're using is probably not good enough quality paint. There is actually a really big difference between what's considered student quality paint and heavy body artists' acrylic paint. The main difference that you'll notice with those sort of student quality paints is that they can be really thin and not as heavily pigmented. So if you're painting with them, you'll find that even if you add only a tiny little bit of water, those paints will get really transparent and you have to layer a lot on top of each other. Whereas when you're using the thicker, heavy body professional paints, you don't need to... you don't have that transparency, so you can layer the colours on top of each other a lot more opaquely. And I think that could probably be the problem that's going on here, is that the quality of the paint that you're using is probably not that great. And so that's why you're not getting the same coverage as what I'm getting when I'm painting with acrylics on paper. But that being said, some colours are just naturally more transparent than others. So it depends on the colours that you're using as well. And in order to sort of combat that transparency, you can add a little bit of white to the paint that you're using, and that will sort of bulk up the opacity a bit. But yeah, I think that the main problem that I see with people having that thinner sort of wash of paint is usually to do with quality of paint, not necessarily how they're doing it. So maybe invest in a couple of slightly more upper market brands of paint and see how you go with those. By upper market, I mean brands such as the Matisse that I use, which is an Australian brand. Golden Acrylic, I know that brand is available pretty much everywhere in the world. They're a really good quality, thick, heavy body paint. And yep, I definitely recommend those. I don't use them as much because they're not made in Australia, so they are a bit more expensive for us Australians to purchase. So that's why I don't tend to use them as much. For me, Matisse paint is produced in Australia, so it's a lot more affordable for Australians to buy. But essentially, I would compare Golden paint and the Matisse paint. They're pretty much on par as far as consistency goes. I'm talking about the heavy body versions, or Matisse, it's called Structure, but they're pretty much the same consistency. So if you're wondering, whether it's worth researching Matisse paint and getting that if you are overseas, I don't bother. It's pretty much exactly the same as the Golden acrylic paint. So if you can get that, use that. But yeah, so I think you'll find that if you are using cheaper paints, you're probably not going to get the same effect, or the effect that you're looking for, at least. While you're just starting out, practicing with cheaper student quality paints is fine, but you have to understand that they're cheaper for a reason, and you're not going to get the sort of look that you're after if you're not willing to invest in better quality products. So don't be afraid of investing money. Unfortunately, art supplies are expensive, especially good quality art supplies. That's just part of the deal. Like, if you want to invest in this hobby, it's just like any other hobby. You need to be willing to pay money to get the best materials, and the better the materials are that you are using, the better the results you're going to get. So if you're feeling a little bit disheartened because your paintings aren't really coming out, the colours aren't as rich, and there's not as much vibrancy, and the paint isn't as thick, and you're using cheaper quality paints, then try investing in just a couple of colours in a better brand. You'll know that I paint with a lot of limited palettes. You don't need to have a whole range of colours. You can paint with like just 3 or 4 basic primaries. So, a blue, a yellow, a red, and a white. And then maybe like a burnt sienna, or, a burnt umber. That's really all you need. So if you don't want to invest too much money, you can just purchase 3 or 4 good quality paints and test them out and see if that makes a bit of a difference to your paintings and your quality of your paintings, because that may be the problem that you're having. Yeah, so I hope that helps. Anyway, you can see here that I'm just been slowly building up this painting. The painting that I'm doing, the reference photo is portrait orientation, and I'm actually painting it landscape, so I have had to stretch the scene out a little bit. But besides that, I am just following along. You can kind of see up the corner there my phone in the shot. I work a lot when I'm working from reference photos. I usually have my phone next to me, and I'm just working from that. But I'm not really paying too much attention. Most of the time, I think I've mentioned this in other videos, when I am looking at that reference photo, I'm actually squinting my eyes so that it's blurry, and I'm really just looking at the shapes that I can find in the lights and the darks. And so that's what I'm using the reference photo for, and just building up lots of layers. So you can sort of see the more layers you add, the more interest you're going to have. Another problem that I do see a lot when teaching beginner artists is that they don't add enough paint. You need to be willing to put paint down in, a fairly thick manner in order to get good coverage. If you're afraid of the paint, and if you're afraid of putting down too much, colour, then you're going to end up with a bit of a wishy-washy kind of looking painting. You need to commit to putting that paint onto your surface. So you can see that I am layering up a few different colours, and the paint that I'm putting on down, it's quite thick. And so, yeah, that's another problem I do see a lot of beginners do, is that you're just a bit scared of the paint. So try not to be afraid of the paint. So here I'm just adding in, there was actually some lighter leaves and foliage in the foreground. So I'm adding that in now. And when you're doing a complicated scene like this, kind of break things down into their basic shapes. So I've blocked in, the basic shapes, obviously, of the trees, and then the background foliage, the grass, the shadows, the foreground grass, and now I'm doing the leaves on top. So it's they're all just different shapes, and I haven't really gone into a huge amount of detail with any of these layers, because that's just part of the building up process. Once you've got all of these shapes in place and the basic values of lights and darks, you can then go in and add more details if you want to, or you can keep it quite simple. But it's the easiest way to sort of paint a complicated scene like this is to just break it down into really simple shapes and concentrate on those shapes instead of heaps of detail. So besides a bit of painting here and there's not really much else that's going on around here. We did have an earthquake the other day, which was exciting. I live in Melbourne in Australia, and we do not have earthquakes very often at all. In fact, we don't get earthquakes very often in Australia in general. Well, when I say we don't get earthquakes, we do get small tremors, but they're not usually strong enough for anyone to feel them. And so once every blue moon, we'll get a slightly larger earthquake that people will start to feel, but usually it's not really that, we don't get them that often. But I believe it was Wednesday morning, Melbourne in Victoria was struck with an earthquake that was, I believe the final reading was 5.8 on the Richter scale, which for us is huge. I was laying in bed. I'd only just woken up. It was about 9:15 in the morning. And at first I thought it was the washing machine, because when the washing machine goes on its spin cycle, it does actually vibrate and shake the house. But this was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I knew that I hadn't put the machine on, and the kids were still in bed, and my partner wouldn't have put it on before he went to work. So I'm thinking, why is the house shaking? And so I sort of sat up a little bit, and then the shaking got a lot more violent. Like, it was rattling everything, and the whole house was shaking, and there was a really loud rumbling noise as well, and it sort of sounded like a truck going past, but we don't live on a road really where trucks go. Anyway, like, the fact that it took me a good 30 or 40 seconds to even realise it was an earthquake just goes to show that we do not get earthquakes here very often. By the time the rumbling stopped, my brain clicked in, and I thought, oh my God, that was an earthquake. And a split second later, my daughter messaged me saying, what was that? And because she's in the room downstairs. And then a minute later, my partner actually rang on the phone, and he works about 45 minutes, to an hour away. And he's on the phone. He's like, did you feel that? That was an earthquake. I'm like, oh my God, yes, that was an earthquake. We totally felt it. And yeah, it turns out pretty much all of Victoria felt it. They felt it all the way to New South Wales. Parts of Tasmania felt it. It was a big earthquake for us. Thankfully, there was no damage. I think one or two buildings in Melbourne, some chimneys toppled over, and a really old building, some of its wall came down because it was brick. But besides that, generally speaking, we were pretty lucky in that there was hardly any damage at all. But it was definitely exciting, and that was the talk of the town and the talk of social media for, a good 24 hours. Everyone was very excited. It's like the most exciting thing that's happened around here in a long time, considering the fact that everyone is locked inside. But yeah, so that was the thing. But yeah, besides that, it's pretty much been, business as usual around here. So here is the satisfying tape peel of this piece. After I completed this one, I did complete another one based on a photo that I took at the same time. And like I said, I've already done a few more of these, and I will be doing a couple more, and I will list them all up onto my website for sale at the same time as a bit of a collection. They're about A3 in size, so they will fit into like a standard frame. And yeah, I really liked how this one came out. The colours are really fresh. We're coming into spring. Well, in fact, we're actually pretty much, well and truly in spring here in Melbourne. So the weather is beautiful, and there's lots of green grass and spring trees everywhere. And so I feel like this painting really reflects that, and it sort of has that fresh springish feel. And this is the other one that I did, which is a bit more of a tree, mainly the tree like focus of this sort of path, but still pathways. This is a walking track down near the river, the Yarra River, which runs through Warburton. And so it's actually a little bit overflowing at the minute because we've had a fair bit of rain. So yeah, that's why I included a bit of river in it. And this is how those two paintings look once I photographed them properly. So yeah, I think they're really bright and happy, and I was really pleased with them. So because the weather has been quite nice, we have been able to go on some walks. This is the redwood forest in Warburton. This part isn't redwoods, this is just the other part, but this is just a sort of reserve, I guess you could call it, near our house. And so we've been walking, and we've been taking our cats for a walk. We've had Bean for nearly 4 years now, actually. He's 4 years old. And so we had a backpack for him that he's been in quite a lot, and he really enjoys. And so we then bought a second backpack so that we could also take Luna, our other cat, for a walk. So this is Bean on my back, enjoying his, nature walk. And this is little Luna on Charlie's back in the other backpack, also enjoying the nature walk. She hasn't been in the backpack very much, so she's not as relaxed as Bean, but she'll get used to it. And you can see here that the Bean's so comfortable that he fell asleep. So if you're worried about them being anxious, they're not. They actually really love being in these backpacks. So we've been on a few walks around the redwood forest with the cats, which is nice. And the weather was beautiful. And another thing that I've been working on over the last week or so since we last spoke is some more still life paintings. Again, the flowers in my garden are very much in full bloom. So I, picked some flowers from the garden, and I've really enjoyed putting, sort of setting up my own little still life sort of setups, I guess. Some people ask me, where am I getting my reference photos for the still lifes? Well, most of them I've actually put together myself. So this one was actually based on the setup that I had that I just filmed a minute ago. I added in a few things in the background that weren't actually there, like that stripy bottle and some of the lemons. But generally speaking, the setup of the flowers and the cloth and everything was based on what I had in front of me. So yeah, this is I really like this one, and I don't usually use these colours very often. It has a lot of red in it, and I'm not really a fan of red, but I think that I really like it in this particular painting. I think it works quite well. It's really vibrant and it's really bright, and it's a very happy still life painting. So yeah, I've done a few of them now. A few of them have sold, and I think this one is listed up on my website at the moment. But so I did some of that, and I've also been working on some other smaller paintings, like this one, for example. This is on I think it's a 14 by 18 inch canvas, and it's just based on a photo that I found online of, I believe it was a cottage garden somewhere. I just really like sort of jumping in between, flowers in vases and flowers in gardens at the moment. I'm very sort of nature inspired right now. So this is another sort of a field of flowers painting. This one is already sold. I think the other one at the moment of filming this is still available, but this one will be heading to its new home once it's varnished and packaged up. And I really like the different shapes of flowers in this one, and you can sort of see the depth and the distance in it. So I was quite happy with this. So that's a little update on what's been happening around here the last few, week or so since I last saw you all. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope that you are all well and being creative and taking some time for yourself to do things that you enjoy and things that inspire you. And I will see you all again in my next video.